Hey everyone, Kyle Stelter here from the Wild Sheep Society, the past president. I'd like to welcome you to episode number 6, where talk is sheep. So today this is a pretty cool one. We got somebody on board on the call today that I'm super stoked about. Shane Pallister, welcome to Talk is Sheep. So
Hey, howdy, boys.
awesome.
Glad to be here.
Totally stoked, buddy. We had our show in Kamloops, March 13th, I think was the date. I think it was March 12th. We were all sitting around, and you'd come down. You were going to be our Friday night speaker, and totally stoked about it and hear your stories. And I guess it was the Thursday night before that. I think it was maybe March 11th, but we had to pull the pin on it, and then we sat around and had some adult beverages and talked a bunch of trash, and it was just fantastic.
Yeah.
It was pretty.
Yeah, I think that was a night that they canceled it. We just got there and then they
Exactly.
decided it was going to be canceled. So.
Well, in fact, it was that room. We were sitting in that room. We made the decision, and I texted you and said, "Hey, yeah, we're in trouble here.
Oh yeah,
so
that's right.
come down, sympathy pops." So that was a pretty cool night to shoot the shit with you there. And so anyway, welcome to the show. Great to have you. I guess you're at home in up north in Fort St. John, or what's the story there?
Yeah, up in BC, we're sitting in a sideways blizzard this morning. Went out elk hunting today, and nothing was out but us.
Yeah. The diehard hunters are out. The animals aren't, but the diehard hunters are.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. How about you, Steve? What's going on?
I've had luck. I've had luck on some of the worst days. So.
Yeah.
We've had snow for about 2 weeks, and all of a sudden it's sideways rain. So I'm in Prince George, so we're not too far apart, Shane. But yeah, it's chucking rain, and it's just goopy and gross out there.
Good times. So I guess it's that time of year, right? So, so Shane, bit of a weird year, right? Like lots going on. We were just talking before we started recording here about hunts and stuff. And what's happening in your world? What's happening hunt wise? I know you're doing a bunch of guiding, but is COVID messing you up, or what's going on there?
Well, I'm a dual citizen. So for me, traveling across the border hasn't been an issue. I'm kind of one of the lucky ones as far as travel goes. So I've been working as a guide up in Alaska in the fall for the last several years, and went up and did some work up around Healy, just around Denali Park in the Alaska Range this year. They had a lot of American clients come, but any of the international ones they had a lot of trouble with. Alaska had a mandatory test policy before you could come in, so I think that's how they kind of tackled that. But as far as hunting goes, we had a pretty busy season. There wasn't. Once you're back out in the backcountry in Alaska, COVID wasn't really an issue. Nobody paid any attention to to what was going on out in the real world. Different planet back there.
Good place to be, right?
Oh, it was great. Yeah, it was amazing. Unfortunately, they had a really heavy snowfall last year, so I think they had 6 or 8 feet in March at one time, and a lot of the older rams pretty much succumbed to that. They couldn't get through it. So there was a lot of young sheep, but not many old sheep that were left, and we found several deadheads, that kind of thing.
Okay. So Shane, you mentioned the dual citizenship there, and I know there's a big backstory there on your family and stuff. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like, I know you've talked before to me about your dual citizenship. How does that work? Like, talk about your upbringing, where you came from, and I guess since we're talking about wild sheep and hunting, and talk about your background there and how that works. How does that all come together?
In Montana, I was born in Montana. My dad, Greg Pallister, went to school to be a biologist. He wanted to be a wildlife biologist. So during the course of his college, he decided to write a thesis on bighorn sheep. So he made the decision to move us up to a ranger station in the Beartooth Mountains in Daisy Pass. So for 2 years of my, adolescent life, 3 to 5, I think, 4 to 6, something like that, we were living in a, up pretty high elevation and pretty remote. And I was going around with him all the time. He was doing sheep counts. They were collaring sheep. He was doing forage studies, all sorts of kind of really in-depth kind of coverage of this herd that was living in a really kind of insane part of Montana, very inaccessible, very steep, very remote. So he spent a lot of time doing aerial studies or aerial tracking of them and that kind of thing. And one of the rams that was kind of habituating around that area was a ram they had a fluorescent orange collar, and everybody called him the red ram. It was maybe a 6-year-old bighorn, but I was just completely enthralled with that sheep. And somewhere I have a drawing of it, a drawing of this ram, and it's got a crosshair on it. At 5 years old, I drew a crosshairs on it. So, I mean, I kind of fell in love with sheep, very early age. And then during the course of, my dad ended up getting a job as a biologist and was doing some work, with sheep. And after the season, he and another fellow decided to go up and go hunting and cleared it with his boss, and everything. And they both got rams, but there was somebody caught wind of them hunting, and because they were biologists, they figured they shouldn't be hunting like everybody else. So they threw up a big stink and created a kind of a little publicity problem for him. And his boss turned around and said, I never told them they could go. And so it ended up causing them troubles as far as that went. Kind of soured him on the wildlife biology, and then he went on to work for the Department of Agriculture. And this would have been after kind of the precursor to the health problems I had growing up when I was a little kid. So we were kind of on easy street as far as that went at that time. He kind of had his family organized. When I was 1.5, I was diagnosed with cancer. I had a nerve cancer in my back, and we traveled over to Madison, Wisconsin, and actually my grandfather was a geneticist, a very kind of renowned doctor, and my uncle also was a pretty renowned doctor, and some of my grandpa's friends, and they were the ones that operated on me and took the tumor out. And when I was 3, it came back again, and they took the same tumor out again, and then they took the muscle around it, and then they radiated the whole thing with like the old Bruce Banner Hulk style radiation. Not the kind of stuff they use these days. It was kind of like, okay, let's open the trapdoor, everybody go hide in the lead room. So, I mean, it eradicated the cancer, but it caused me a lot of problems later on in life because it damaged bone tissue and my lungs and those sorts of things, So as I was growing, I had problems that were kind of after effects of that. So we spent up until I was 12 years old in Montana, and then my parents decided out of the blue that they wanted to start a cattle ranch, and they had a friend up in Fort St. John, and they literally sold everything, quit their jobs, and left and moved to Canada. And I mean, it was, looking back on it, it was a pretty brave and gutsy thing to do. I can't believe my mom agreed to it, but they literally packed all their shit on these trailers and drove across the border. I can remember driving along, and the lawnmower we had fell off of the trailer on the interstate and went bouncing down the freeway. We had dogs and we had all kinds of stuff. So we headed up north, and my old man got involved in cattle ranching, and then right about the time he was starting to get kind of established, he got into an industrial accident. He got his arm crushed by a cat and got his arm severed, and it was reattached in Vancouver. That was in like 81, so you can imagine the technology then wasn't super great, and it was successful. They saved his arm. But with a little bit of, I mean, probably 80% of what it was. So that kind of, and with the economy, kind of crushed his dreams of being a cattleman. So then he got involved in the oil field. And with his background in sheep hunting and being an avid outdoorsman in Montana, we'd always been incredibly active hunting, not just sheep. And he made some friends with some local hunters around here and started looking into sheep hunting. And then the rest is kind of history as far as the hunting goes. The hunting's great in British Columbia. And, he taught me a lot about sheep hunting, a lot about not sure if I lost you there.
Yeah, kind of. I think
you're back now. All right.
Okay. Where did I lose you at?
You mentioned you were getting sick about 1.5 years old.
Oh, I lost you guys that early?
No, I'm kidding.
You're killing me.
Oh, we got most of it, just the last 5 seconds.
Yeah.
So anyways, my old man made friends with a lot of the local people, a lot of people that were involved in sheep hunting. Also, a lot of them were horseback oriented, so he started hunting in the mountains with horses. We had horses left over from our cattle operations. So we started making treks into the mountains, hunting caribou at first, and then he went and killed a ram, and then I started hunting sheep, and then he wanted to hunt everything and sheep, and I started hunting sheep and then everything after sheep. And we kind of had a meeting of the minds about what we were going to be hunting first. And I'm like, you go ahead and shoot. You can haul meat out of the mountains all day long. I'll be back there sheep hunting. And finally realized, like, hey, that's probably a good idea. So we ended up, hunting for sheep first, and then moving into the other things. But we did it as residents. We did it by going out and learning the trails and learning where the sheep were and learning the habitat. We didn't, a lot of people were at that time were pretty closed mouthed about it and weren't very, very gung-ho to share their information. There was a lot of contention between residents and guides in BC. I'm sure you guys know very well what that's like. They were having huge allocation things, and my dad made friends with Rich Peterson early on, and Rich was a big proponent of resident hunting, thankfully. And Rich had been sheep hunting all over the mountains and traveled all over the country. So he kind of took my dad in and showed him where he was going, what he was doing, and then we got after it pretty hard and heavy, pretty hot and heavy.
I don't think there'd be a better mentor than Rich back then.
So Shane,
so I think
somebody go
ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. So I think a few years ago you did a trek with your dad, like a 30-day trek, and you retraced the steps of the Chadwick stuff. So can you talk a little bit about that? I think your dad was pretty elderly at the time too, right? It was a pretty, it was just challenging doing the trip with him, and then doing such a big trip like that. Can you talk a little bit about that trip for us?
Sure, you bet. Well, my dad's always been a very avid outdoorsman. He's been very active in sports, and he's always been a hard worker. I mean, he's a champion of a human being as far as I'm concerned. Just an all-around amazing man. Good family man, good father, good friend. And he at 71 years old, his heart's all in, but his body is not so much anymore. And I'm always trying to tell him, you got to exercise, you got to keep in shape, you got to stay fit. And he's always like, I am fit, and then he's having a hard time for the first few weeks. So when we first started off, he was really super excited to go. And, I'd pre-planned this out, from a expedition kind of a view, as well as I wanted to film it and create a monument to my father, to his lifetime and, his experiences, and do something that, and can chronicle something that he really loved to do. So, I had a certain amount of food. I made a lot of pemmican. We had a lot of things that were really compact, high calorie, lightweight, that kind of thing, to make it through, because we weren't having, there was no food coming in. We weren't meeting anybody, and we didn't know how long we were going to go for. So, we started off, and the first couple of days he was wiped. Like, he was completely flat on his back, snoring like out to the world. You get up in the morning, and it was almost like, the old proverbial door that when you open it, it creaks. and and after about the first week, he started to limber up, and then due to the caloric deficit that he was running, he started to drop a lot of weight. And by week 2, he was really starting to loosen up. He'd probably dropped at that point 20 pounds. So, you could imagine, having a 20-pound barbell on your backpack and somebody walk along going, hey, you don't need this anymore, So he was feeling lighter on his feet. He was sleeping better, all that sort of thing. And then, so he was really starting to enjoy himself then, So we started out. We went in. We didn't go in at Hudson Hope where Chadwick started off. They went up and traveled up all the way up the Halfway River and all the way up in. We kind of jumped on the trail right where at Bucking Horse. They went in there. So we, back in, I had about 170, I think it is, and we rode all the way back in, and then rode over the top of the pass down into where the Bessa came out close, just below Redfern, crossed there, dropped into Petrie Creek, and then dropped over into Keeley Creek, and then hunted several of the drainages all the way down through there. Rode out on top of the Caribou Range. Rich Peterson had always talked to my dad about that. It was a big, long plateau that comes off of the mountains, and with sheep all over on it. And we just spent our time hunting, some of the spots that we had heard about that he'd never been to. And I kind of wanted to take him to all those, and they happened to be all along where Chadwick was traveling when he was back in there. Nobody knows for sure exactly where he was, but judging by his journal entries and stuff, you can get a fairly good idea of where he was, So we hunted all through that country, and we just basically kind of, we went where we want. We did what we wanted, and we didn't have any kind of schedule or anywhere we needed to go or anything we needed to do. We just, traveled along and hunted, and, spent a lot of time collecting berries and mushrooms, and, caught fish, and just kind of, lived off the land as much as we could to spread our supplies as far as we could, and, kind of extend our trip to as long as we could without having any kind of, logistical problems. We didn't have any injuries or anything serious. So probably our biggest pitfall in that trip was we lost a horse. It had chronic alside poisoning, so it ended up going into liver failure, maybe from the stress. We don't know, but we had a friend fly some medical supplies in, and we tried to save the horse and ended up not being able to. So we were camped up in Keeley Creek then, and that a pack of wolves came in and ate half the horse right by our tent. one night, and then the next night came and ate the rest of it. Must have been a hell of a pack of wolves. You never even heard them, never saw them, nothing, you know.
It's unreal.
Yeah, there's a few parts to that story that we never told anybody. Like I'd lost a shoe off of my horse, and you know, I had to go out there with an axe and chop a leg off of that dead horse and take the shoe off of it and put it back on my horse. You know, things that aren't really TV friendly.
But it's the reality of a hunt like that, right? Things happen.
Yeah, but I mean, definitely necessary, because that horse, you know, spent a long time traveling, and you know, without a shoe on that foot would have definitely been sore. You know, he would have made it, but it would have been made it difficult for him. So we ended up hunting down through that country, and then we dropped into the Prophet River and rode up into backside of the Prophet, and my dad ended up killing his ram. You know, I think we were around day 30, somewhere in there.
Wow.
He killed his ram.
That's a hell of a journey.
Yeah, and he passed up some other rams along the way. There was actually a pretty good ram that we saw kind of, you know, up off the south side of the Prophet, and you know, it was a nice ram, but it was a really shitty spot. You know, nothing that we wanted to jump at, you know. And then there was another one that was kind of just a legal, maybe 155, 158 inch ram, and he's got plenty of those. So I just told him, no, that's not happening, you know.
You're all the way back in there, make it count.
Yeah, so we ended up finding the ram that he got, and I mean, I don't know if you sat down and picked the perfect spot on planet Earth to kill a sheep, if you could have found a spot like the place that he anchored that ram. I mean, epic isn't even a strong enough word to describe it. It was on the end of a knife ridge with a fall to your death on one side and then drop off on the other.
Okay.
And a flat spot where it was bedded. And I mean, nothing on the other side of it. Like, we're talking free fall in 320 degrees, 340 degrees around it, you know, and the view off there was just incredible. You know, it was t-shirt weather. There was just a slightest breeze. It was dead calm. I mean, if there's a such thing as the sheep gods, they were definitely smiling on him that day. You know, and it was an incredible. I mean, one of those once in a lifetime minutes, you know, moments that you'll never ever be able to recreate, and there's no amount of language or no amount of visual that will ever do justice to how epic that moment was for him, you know. You know, and then to see him walk out and just stand there and look off into the distance and just, you know, take a moment of silence to just take it all in is really, really amazing, you know. And I'm incredibly grateful that I had the opportunity to be able to not only go and do that, but also with the help of some very close friends, Cody Robbins, be able to produce and edit that and make it into something that was incredibly great, you know. I'm definitely in his debt for the help for that, and I mean, he did it just because he's a great guy, you know, one of the best guys I know.
Wow.
Where can we watch that video? If somebody wants to see that, Shane, where can they watch the movie of that?
We have it posted on YouTube. It's 39 Days on the Trail of Chadwick.
Okay.
I'll put it at the end.
Yeah, we're actually working on some ideas for some more things coming up here. I just came out of one of those divorces that everybody makes jokes about, you know, the comedians. So we just kind of come out on the right side of that, and you know, there's a lot of positive things in the future for me and for my little girls who are both avid hunters, Maya and Justice. They're little killers.
That's awesome.
They're definitely predatory, but they're also, you know, very personable little girls, and you know, they're really into the idea of going out and doing some filming, and so we'll see what happens with that.
What do you have in mind, Shane? What are you thinking?
Well, I'd like to chronicle their up and coming, as they're starting to get to the point now where they're super independent. They're able to handle higher caliber rifles, and they're both avid horse, they're into horses and rodeo and that kind of stuff. So they're good riders. So they both are very adamant that they want to start sheep hunting immediately. So
How old are they, Shane?
Maya is 15 and Justice is 11.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
they've been out this fall already. I've seen them on a bunch of stuff with. I seen them in a meat locker yesterday. So.
Oh yeah, Justice this year. She said, I want a moose this year. When I'm getting my core this year, so I want a moose. And I'm like, okay, that's a lofty goal. We'll see what we can do. And they both got moose.
Awesome.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, so we're just in the process of taking care of that right now, doing all the butchering. We made jalapeno cheddar smokies last night and smoked them all in the double smoker we have. So
Love it.
yeah, they're right into all that, so it's great.
So you're thinking about chronicling a sheep hunt with them? Is that the kind of the next project you kind of have in your mind?
That's one of them. Yeah, I want to have them both there. Like I'm pretty confident we can go up and do a double header, both of them, and have them both on the same trip, and just kind of a family thing. We're gonna do our best to get the old man involved, and he's 75 this year. He's still winning the mountains this year hunting when I was gone up in Alaska, so he's still gung-ho to go. So
So it's
I'll have
like
that
that.
drive.
Are you guys doing horseback, or can ride in and then?
Ours will be horseback for sure with the girls. Like we'll do something where we're gonna go back and we'll have enough time to look around, and there's some good places that are good hunts for them, not too difficult.
Nice.
I think maybe the most difficult part of any of it would be the river crossings. They're always well, they can be a pain in the butt. I mean, the last leg of our hunt coming out, we got down to the Prophet River. It started raining like about, I think, day 31 or something, and I mean I've never seen it rain that hard in the mountains for that long. Like it rained just like a deluge, and I've been hunting up on this hillside since 1991 back in there. And that the whole front of the hillside slid from the rain. And then the backside of where my dad shot his ram slid the next day. And I mean, these are places that, there's no slides there. And then we got down to the Prophet River. We started getting into snow and hail and sleet, and it was below zero, but it was wet.
Oh, gross.
And I mean, we were talking about, 12 hours a day riding through brush, going down, and trying to stay warm and dry was almost impossible. And the horses were already, pretty beat up from the trip, and they had lost a lot of their conditioning, and we got down to the river, and it was still sleeting, and we looked at the river, and the river was like, at the conditions our horses were in, it was just, we weren't getting a chance crossing it, just wasn't smart. So we set up camp that night. We got up the next morning, and the back channel where we had camped, we were up on a flat little bench, and the back channel was 6 feet deep in water the next morning. So I don't know how many feet it came up. It must have come up, the river must have come up maybe a solid 3 feet overnight, just across the main thing of it. And it sounded like a jet engine coming down there. We were just like, whoa, So we had good grass for the horses, and we just kind of hung out. We actually built a big, huge fire and just kept rotating the horses by, warming them up, because looking back on it after we got back out, the caloric load that a horse needs to keep, just to maintain its body weight at that temperature is incredible, and they just weren't getting it on the food that we had. So that's when we called our buddy Joanne to come and help us cross, so we could cross them empty just for their sake. And then we got out to the Minneker River, which is normally you can cross that thing in a four-wheeler and not get your feet wet. It was bank to bank, So we camped there that night, and that night was really interesting because, we were down to minimal food by then, almost nothing, other than we had sheep meat. But my dad suffered leg cramps that night that were just incredible. Like it actually brought him to tears. They were so bad. And so he managed to get through those. And then the next morning, that river dropped 3 feet overnight, like literally 3 feet. It was really cold, It literally just dropped right down from where we were camped, like stuck a stick in the bank. And we got up in the morning and we damn near still had to swim across. Like all the trails that we normally ride down, like one trail you see in the show is just all water, down through this cut line. It's 3 feet of water. It was unreal. So we got out to the end of there. We had a friend come and meet us in on the way out with, a bunch of oats and stuff for the horses. So we stopped and gave them a power snack, but they were wiped out when we got back. They took a lot of TLC to get back to healthy again. But I mean, they were rock hard. They look like they were Greek warrior horses, when they come out of there. But definitely, I mean, it was a tough trip on everyone. My dad lost 38 pounds on that hunt.
Wow.
And I lost 28. I don't know if I even have that much to lose. But
how long was the trip? How long were you guys away for, Shane?
We were 39 days in.
Wow.
From start to finish. Yeah.
Amazing. Just out of curiosity, you remember how long the Chadwick expedition was? How long?
I can't remember offhand. I mean, I read a lot of the old diary stuff that they had, but I know they suffered a lot of hardships on that trip too. And I mean, back then hunting was kind of a free for all. They were just like shooting things left, right, and center,
Yeah.
For meat and whatever.
How many horses did you guys take on that trip with you?
We took 6 horses. So when we lost that horse at 2 weeks, we had to haul all the stuff that horse was wearing on another horse. So, the extra panniers, the pack saddle, the blankets, that stuff had to go with us everywhere we went. So it was definitely a challenge kind of organizing that. But we had, really I had spent a lot of time planning how we were going to bring stuff and how much we were going to bring, and to try and keep it compact. So that definitely helped us, throughout the whole trip. A person can really get out of hand with horses bringing a lot of extra stuff. And, I really went more of the minimalist route. So, all our cook sets, everything was just small and compact and really light. Even our stove, I built a stove out of an ammo can before we left. And then, the stovepipe was just some pieces of aluminum conduit, maybe 2.5 inches. So it would all fit in a pannier, and it was all compact, and then there was things that we had that fit inside the stove. And, we knew we were going to do a lot of alpine stuff. So we had packed briquettes and coal with us. So we were up on top of some mountain ranges that had nothing for fuel for the stove, so we would burn the briquettes and the coal in it at night. And, we didn't have to gather firewood or anything like that. Super light, very compact, high energy stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting experience. It was a lot of fun. And I mean, I was confident. I was 100% confident I could go out and live out there on my own. And I mean, I'm one of those guys that can turn around and walk away into the wilderness and never come back and be just fine,
And we all live.
Yeah. So anyway, we got out of there, and it was a great trip. We were coming down the highway. I forget what time we got into the ranch, maybe 11 at night. And my old man's transmission was literally on its last 100 feet when we pulled into the driveway. Like he had a hard time even getting it in to get it repaired.
Wow.
We had the light was dinging, and
And you had a horse trailer, I'm sure, I guess, eh?
Yeah, we had the horse trailer on.
Yeah. Wow, cool. So what was the biggest challenge on that trip? Was it the weather? Like, obviously your dad and trying to manage, being comfortable for him, right? Because he's not as active as he was. But what would you say the biggest challenge was with that whole episode?
The biggest challenge, without a doubt, was the care and maintenance of the horses. Because they're, they get nicked up and dinged up during trips like that, and that was definitely 100% the biggest part of that trip was, maintaining our horses for that period of time. There was a couple of days where we had to stop and just give them a break, and we had to camp where there was good feed most of the time. And in hindsight, it would have been more beneficial to stash some high protein feed somewhere in there halfway along where we were going to go, but that kind of would have taken away from the whole premise of the trip. We were wanting to go out there and do it expedition style and do it. I think we traveled over 350 miles through the mountains on that trip.
Wow, amazing.
Like linear miles. That's not counting up and down and looking all over and that kind of thing. But we covered a lot of territory there.
So 10 miles a day roughly is what you were doing then.
Yeah, we didn't really do a lot of long range traveling. As far, there's a few days where we traveled a long ways, but most of the time we were in good sheep country, so we were hunting everywhere we went.
Right.
So we were, the golden rule to sheep hunting is, sit down on your ass and glass. Keep looking, look more. So we spent a lot of time glassing, a lot of time looking, and really the whole, obviously we're both avid hunters, so the idea was to, for me, the main idea was to get my dad a really nice ram and to chronicle it, like I said, and create a memorial for him. And the other idea of it was just to go out and connect, on a primitive level as father and son, and go out and be in a place where we had to rely on each other for survival, and we had to rely on each other's knowledge of the outdoors and the wilderness and the country that we were in, and all of the experience that we both had over the years, to navigate through a lot of what was pretty harsh country. And so a lot of the places we went, there's no trails. We made our own.
Amazing. So you carry a saw with you too and stuff, or what did you do for that?
We didn't carry a saw with us on this trip. We just didn't have the room for it on this one. We had a small axe with us, but the majority of the places that if you need an axe to get through somewhere with a horse, you're probably in not that great of a place. There's here and there, but if you're having to hack I've done that before too. If you have to hack your way through somewhere, you'll hate life.
Yeah.
Wow.
It reminds me of bighorn hunting with Rod Schramm, and we dropped down off of a really steep ridge, and we knew our horses would go down, probably not up, but we figured we could side hill along and get back to where we needed to get. And we got down into these steep side hills where these sheep had been walking, and in the timber, and these big cuts in these hillsides with these little tiny goat trails that went across them, and into the thickest, shittiest dog hair you've ever seen. Like, I had an axe with me. I think I chopped down 5,000 trees over the course of the next day trying to get out of there. We had to walk our horses up through a big rock chute waterfall to get up out of this spot. It was one of those things. I think we stopped at about 11 o'clock at night, and it was one of those nights where it was really hot and really humid, and we were actually had our shirts off. It was so hot. And we both, I don't know, he must have cut down an equal amount of trees. Like, we had to literally cut trees down to get our horses through where we were going. It was so thick, like chop a path all the way out of there. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Cool. So we're on the topic of sheep hunting now. Somebody's starting out, somebody's interested in sheep hunting. What advice are you going to give a new sheep hunter? And not so much the horseback, like think of somebody that just wants to take off. Steve's going to do his first sheep hunt this coming fall, not only next year. So what's your sort of top 3 pearls of wisdom for a guy like Steve that's starting out?
Well, a lot of people don't have the advantage of talking to people that know where the sheep are. A lot of people are tight-lipped about it. We kind of had I was kind of raised that way too. You keep your secret spot secret, you're competitive with hunting. But as I got older, I started to, you learn about humility and you learn about friendship. And I started to notice people like Rich Peterson who would go out of his way to help people and, tell them where a good spot was to go, or just get them out and get them active, and that appealed a lot more to me than hoarding it for myself or keeping my secrets, so I kind of embraced that persona of, it's not that I'm writing a book for everybody, like go here, go here, go here, but I would help people get out and get in the right spots and, have a good chance of finding sheep. So, I mean, talk to your peers, talk to your friends, find out people that have, the same kind of interests you do, and pick them for knowledge and see what they have to say. Some people are really helpful and happy to help. Some people aren't. And that's going to be your greatest kickoff is learning about the habitat, learning about where they live and how to get there and that kind of thing, and that usually comes from people that have gone before you. So I think that would probably be one of the biggest advantages is getting yourself involved with people that are enjoying the same thing that you like to do. The other one would be, I think it's imperative if you're going to go out and you want to be successful to become an expert at what you're doing, start learning about, habitat, learning about behavior, learning about, breeding, learning about, all their behavior mechanisms, what makes them do this, what makes them do that, where do they like to, what kind of structures do they like to habituate, what kind of habitat are you looking for? And all those things will really narrow down where they are and where they aren't, they travel in between places and you'll find them in some of the most bizarre places, but oftentimes you can look up on a mountain and you can pick out spots where sheep are going to bed or they're going to feed, and that would be one of them. And the other one, I consistently see people, the romance of sheep hunting is you get on a backpack, you go out and you just hike and hike and hike and you climb up the mountains and the view is amazing. And I mean, I've gone for a week on horseback through mountains that would kill you on foot and never even seen a sheep. So your odds of picking a mountain and climbing up it and seeing a ram are very small. So I always tell people, hike smart, get somewhere where you can look and glass and find the sheep before you go up after them. I mean, it's not always going to be a failure when you hike up. I mean, there's a lot of places that are great sheep habitat. You're going to have a high percentage chance of seeing sheep, but you can save yourself a lot of walking, if you determine whether that ram's worth going up, at the base of the mountain rather than hiking up to the top and finding out he's not legal or he's not what you want,
No, that's good stuff. So, like, what kind of training would you recommend somebody get into? I hear people say hike, put weights in your pack, or don't bother. You're going to be blasting a lot. So, what would you recommend?
It's 90% aerobic, right? So I only have like 42% of my lung capacity. So for me, hiking is, I always hated it. I love being there doing it, but it's a struggle for me. And I'm never going to be one of those guys that charges up a mountain. Like I would love to know what that feels like, but I can do it 100 days in a row, right? Eat the same food, wear the same clothes, and when other people would go batshit crazy. So, training wise, having strong bones, strong muscles, and having a good aerobic base are fundamental to anything you do, right? The only catch is if you hit the gym heavy and you put on a lot of muscle, that muscle has to be fed. You have to feed it oxygen to keep it going. So that means your aerobic base has to be higher. You have to be in really good aerobic shape. So I think somewhere there's a trade-off between being muscular and being aerobically fit.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 years ago, I went up to Alaska and I was maybe 15 pounds heavier than I am now, muscle. And I noticed a difference for me. Even I was strong, but, you know, I've been going to the gym for almost 10 years straight. So for me, it was, you know, I noticed a heavier drain aerobically than I would have normally.
That's
So,
what
I mean, it also has a lot to do with the individual too, because everybody's, your oxygen uptake rate's different. So, you know, some people might be natural hikers and, you know, I hate those guys. And there's other people that just, they're slow and steady, right? And some people just struggle. So, you know, if you're, I think a good, you know, kind of mid-range weight, you know, kind of training system. I think a really good aerobic base, and definitely, you know, putting weight in your pack is weight training. You know, you're stressing your legs, you're putting extra weight, and you're conditioning your body to be used to that extra weight. It's going to build strength. It's going to build your aerobic base. You know, it's going to get your heart rate up better. All going to benefit you. I've seen a lot of people that I had a friend one night that was drilling holes, and he cut his toothbrush in half.
Yeah.
And then he was drilling holes in the handle. And I go, "What are you doing?" And he goes, I want to make sure everything I'm carrying is lightweight when I go out sheep hunting. And I'm going, okay, that's really cool. But I go, Dick, why don't you just lose 10 pounds and take the whole toothbrush?
exactly
Says,
right.
man, I never thought of that. So, I mean, being fit is your best. It's gonna make your trip a lot more enjoyable. So, I mean, if a guy is carrying extra 10 pounds, go on a diet 3 months before you leave. You know, cut your weight back. You know, there's tons of apps that track your eating. You can enter your food in, and you can put yourself in a calorie deficit and lose 2 or 3 pounds a month without any kind of suffering. And I mean, you just dropped 10 pounds off of your load right there if you're walking. So I think that would be where I would attack it from, definitely, where I have in the past.
Most important piece of gear that you can carry. You hear people say boots, you hear packs, knives. What's the one thing that you feel is most important to get right?
Rain gear. If you don't have good rain gear, that's a life or death item as far as I'm concerned. And the rain gear that I took on that trip, I spent a lot of money on it, and I'm not going to slag the company that you know, but it leaked, and it was a very, you know, it created a big dilemma for me in the last 10 days when we were in that sub-zero water sleet kind of stuff, and I was getting cold. And, you know, exposure, when you're out in the mountains, exposure is your number one concern. You know, exposure is going to kill you before anything else will. So you need to be able to be warm and be dry, you know, and so you need to have a system of gear, whether it's old school, which is perfectly capable of keeping you alive, or new school, but you have to have a system in place that you can strip it down when you're hot, and you can build it up when you're cold, so that you can, if you have to sleep out where you don't have shelter, that you're going to survive. You know, a couple of years ago, a client and I slept out on a glacier, and you want to talk about, I've slept out at night a lot of times around fires, and I've never ever once woke up in the morning and thought to myself, I'll remember, you know, that was the best time of my life. You know, it was just amazing. You know, embers are popping on you, you're getting burnt, the fire's going out, you're freezing on one side, the ground's sucking the heat out of you, you know, or you're sleeping on a saddle and it's far from uncomfortable. But if you have the right kind of gear, like I have some Sitka gear that it used to be waterproof. I put rain gear over it, but it's heavy down jacket and bibs. And I mean, it's like sleeping in a sleeping bag. You could survive with that under a spruce tree, no problem. And I've done it a few times, you know, but that night sleeping on that glacier was definitely a humbling experience, because, you know, we were hiking until the late hours of the morning and got down to a place where we couldn't go anymore. It was too dark and too dangerous. So we curled up by a big rock on little ice plateau and slept on that thing. And I told the guys with me, I go, put on every piece of clothing you have, because this is going to be a long night, a long 4 hours. And my client Wes goes, oh, he goes, I'm too tired. I'm going to be fine. I got all this stuff on. And he woke up about an hour later and he's like, my God, am I cold? He'd get up and shivering, lips were blue. And, and we had just like one little space blanket thing. But I mean, it's amazing how fast things go from really good to really not so good, and if you have good gear, if you have a good layer system, it can save your life, literally, as far as I'm concerned. The exposure is the number one concern you should have in your hunting.
So you weren't going to slag the guys with the crappy gear, but what are you running now for rain gear? What do you got that's do you have a set of gear that works really well right now?
Well, I've gone through a lot of them and I hadn't found any that were waterproof yet. A lot of them that say they were, and I've had people that have had good luck with some of them, but I bought some Gore-Tex Cabela's guide wear.
Okay.
It's black. And I mean, a lot of the hunting you do when you're up in the Alpine, you're in grays and blacks and stuff anyway. So, primary colors or not primary colors, but kind of black and white and grays tend to blend in better than anything,
Yeah.
And this is like black rain gear with, I think it's got some red lettering on the side of it or whatever. It's not something you go, hey, it's the coolest camo pattern ever. But I mean, it's dry, 100%. I had the pants for the last 2 years and I had the coat this year, and we were up in that Healy country and it rained on us for 20 some days and never got wet once through it. So I would definitely advocate for them for sure.
Is it heavy as hell, or can you hike in it?
Super light? It's just a Gore-Tex layer, but it's
okay.
But it's I think it's 2 or 3 layers. I've heard that Arctex is supposed to be, Arcteryx is pretty good too. Like I think they're 3-layer Gore-Tex too. Super expensive, but yeah. I don't know how much they would love having people endorse their product with gut piles in the background.
Yeah, no doubt, for sure.
I'd be happy to.
Yeah. So Shane, you mentioned it before about the mountains, and so you go by the name Ram Hunter Pallister. You told us about fighting with your dad about what you're going to hunt first, and you're hunting sheep. So what is it about sheep? And you said study them, learn them. You don't see guys do that with whitetails much. I'm not saying there are people that do that, but sheep hunters are a very unique breed, right? So what is it? Is it about the animal? Is it about the country? What is it that makes sheep hunting so special, and why are you so bloody addicted to it?
Well, I think for me, I mean, at an early age, they were magical to me. They were like bigger than life. I was a tiny little kid. My dad was, this big bearded guy. He was my hero. He was wore a hat with a foxtail off the back and elk ivories around it, and he was a killing machine and just like unstoppable. Like just a force of nature when it came to hunting. And I wanted to be just like him. I thought he was amazing, and he just loved sheep. I don't know why he really dove into sheep so much, but I think it was just an opportunity that he had. And he kind of jumped at it, and, being so hardy and being so outdoorsy, it was just a great fit for him, So I think for me, it was just something that was just, it was like a unicorn when I was a little kid. It was just this mystical, unbelievable thing that, you just didn't see him all over the place like you did deer and elk and moose, So I would go out with him and I would love it when we ran into that red ram. And then, when we got into teenager kind of life, we were always hunting a lot, but we had never really got into the super long expeditions into the mountains, and my dad started doing them. He did one with the Thiessen brothers back in the day, went up into that prophet country and came out with a giant moose and a sheep and all these stories. And and then some of his brothers came up hunting from Montana with him and went out elk hunting and that kind of thing. And obviously we got involved in it too, and we were hauling elk and moose out of there like crazy. And I think the first ram that I killed was just such an interesting, amazing experience. It just hooked me for life. We hiked up the backside of this big long, we rode our horses up this big hog's back and got up onto this, where we couldn't ride the horses anymore, tied them up, and then hiked up onto this ridgeline where we'd seen a ram from way back down the Prophet River. And you could tell he was a good ram from quite a ways away. He was laying on the skyline, when we'd spotted him. And this was 2 days later. So we climb up there, and we really didn't, looking back, we didn't really have any kind of experience with it, And we were walking up the ridgeline, and we were beside a big rock face, and it had a sheep trail coming down it, and there was a big rock slide below it. And I'm literally in the front, my dad and his brother, and I hear some rocks rattling, and I look up, and here comes 5 sheep running down this rock face above us. Like, we're talking 20 feet away. I grabbed my gun, racked around into it, and as the sheep ran by me, it was literally 7 feet away. I swung my gun like this and went boom, and just it hit it. It hit it so hard, the hair where the bullet went in went like this from the muzzle blast, and knocked the ram right off of his feet. And I threw the gun to my dad and ran down the rock slide because it started, rolling, and grabbed a hold of the horn and the leg and held it there so it wouldn't roll down the rock slide while it was dying.
How old were you?
I would have been 19 then. I had to hold this ram that was fully 100% alive. Well, I mean, it had a 7mm slug right through its shoulder blade, but I mean, literally from 7 feet, just blew it right off its feet. So I held this thing until it died, and then we were all happy, and taking a few pictures and whatever. And all of a sudden, we hear, "Hey, you guys shot my ram!" And we're like, "What?" We look up, and on the top of the cliff, there's a native fella looking down over the top of the cliff. His head popped over the top, and he comes skittering down the rock where the sheep came and come down, and his name was Jimmy Cardinal. He was guiding up in there. And he's like, "Yeah, we spotted that ram from, down the other side, and we jumped him, and I didn't let my client shoot." And he goes, "Well, I guess we'll go hunt somewhere else." So that was my very first ram, and a beautiful double broom, super nice ram, It would have been over 40 inches, not broomed off.
Wow.
But so that was kind of the kickoff to it, and then backpacking it down, and then my dad really, started hunting them heavier too, and then that's where I kind of told him, "Look, I'm going to be sheep hunting more than I'm going to be hunting anything else first," So kind of eclipsed into that, and then we had a lot of great hunts. I mean, between all of us, between he and my dad and my brother, we have quite a few sheep. I think maybe, I don't know, probably 45 or so, something like that.
Wow.
But quite a bunch, yeah. But that was kind of the kickoff, and I mean, to me, the draw to it is, I know a lot of people that hunt sheep now, and I mean, to a T, almost every one of them are, people that are high quality, high functioning people. They're people you can sit down and have good conversations with. They're usually, avid at whatever they're doing. They're usually fit. They're looking for, they're always looking for ways to test themselves, which puts them in a category of people that, like the adventurers, people that go out and, you don't know for sure if that trip is going to be good, or if you're going to get hurt, or if you're going to have enough food, or, if the river is going to go up, but you're going to go out and you're confident in your ability to go out and persevere through that, So I think the camaraderie and the self challenge is probably, in my opinion, what draws most, you know, most of the men that and women that I've met that have gotten involved in sheep hunting. They just seem to really thrive on that, you know, that feeling of testing themselves, you know, if
Cool.
that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense for sure. So you obviously talked a ton about stone sheep and thin horns. You've hunted all over the world. You're in Alaska, Dall sheep hunting, guiding. Obviously, do a ton in Mexico. I presume you've killed something other than a stone. Have you hunted bighorn as well?
Yeah. I killed a bighorn down in southeastern BC. I killed a California down the lower Dall sheep in the territories.
And no bighorn in Mexico yet? Still
Not yet. No,
Okay.
not yet. I
How
mean,
many have you guided down there?
19 now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're almost due, right?
Yeah. Had a good run down there. They've all been book sheep, so it's been a pretty good.
Nice. So you've seen them all. You've seen the 4 species across the landscape. Is there anything that stands out? Like, is there one you prefer over the other? You've guided a ton as well.
Yeah.
So is there something that stands out for you?
I would say stone sheep are probably they just seem to be the most majestic. You know, they're spread out over such a vast range and so much different terrain, and they're incredibly hard to spot most of the time. You know, they can blend in amazingly. You know, they live down in the timber, they live in the alpine. They're definitely, and because of the remoteness, they're definitely super challenging. Dall sheep, as far as locating, they're probably the easiest sheep to hunt that there is by a landslide. You know, you can ride into a valley and go, there's some, there's some, there's some, there's some. You know, like, you can't do that with stone sheep. Like, you're sneaking into a valley worried about exposing yourself because you have to glass everything. You know, with the Dall sheep, it's, you know where they're at already. You know, you can see them from miles away. I think for me, like in the next few years, I'm definitely going to focus on getting a big bighorn. You know, I've spent a lot of time focusing on stone sheep, but I think, you know, I'm really going to spend some serious time looking for a big bighorn in the southern part of BC.
Okay.
I think they're probably the most elusive as far as big sheep go. You know, they live in, you know, a lot of places you find them. They're living in timber like the elk are. You know, so.
Yeah, for sure. So Shane, there's 3 things I know about you. You're a kick-ass, hardcore, diehard hunter, Ram Hunter Pallister. So you're living up to your name. Family's incredibly important. But the one thing that I think a lot of people know about you is you have a story of hardship and adversity, what you've overcome with your cancer, and you're very inspirational to people. And you do a lot of motivational work, whether you mean to or not. You're a motivation for a lot of people, and I know you do a lot of work with wounded warriors. So let's talk about that story, what you're doing there, and you talked a little bit about your personal hardships in life with cancer and overcoming that, and just the story of success as a hunter, right? Like, you know, you're working with half your lung capacity and your back muscle's gone. Meanwhile, you're out there crushing it. So let's talk about that aspect of your life for a bit, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, just a little bit of background. Like, the cancer surgery that I had when I was an infant, when I was younger, that was successful. They eradicated the cancer, but like I said, the radiation therapy that they did at the time was incredibly damaging to the surrounding tissue, and unfortunately, the tumor was right against my spine, like right beside my spinal cord. So when they radiated me from my, you know, all of my thoracic vertebrae were radiated and all the ribs around them. So when I was about 16 years old, the bone tissue in the radiated bone tissue grew at a different rate than the rest of my bone tissue did. So it started to cause, you know, deformity in my spine. So my spine, I developed scoliosis, but I also developed kyphosis. So because of both of those, if you look at a 3D view of my spine spins like a corkscrew. So it got to the point where when I was growing so much after I hit puberty that it had become unstable. And I went down to an orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Treadwell in Vancouver. He was recommended as probably the leading doctor in North America from my grandfather, the geneticist I mentioned. And he told me that if I didn't have some form of corrective surgery, that I only had a life expectancy of maybe another year before my spine was going to degrade to the point where it would cause paralysis or death. So we went to see a surgeon in Spokane who was also a friend of my grandfather's, another really prolific surgeon. And between all of them, they came up with a plan to stabilize my spine and then put a bone strut in it. So they admitted me into the children's hospital, and the first surgery I had, they severed all the spinal muscles off my vertebrae, cut them all loose, and then they put a halo device on my head and screwed it into my skull, and then they ran a cable up on an inclined bed up to a set of weights. They had like 30 pounds on the cable pulling me one way, and the inclination of the bed, gravity pulling me the other way. And I laid on that bed for a long time, months and months, waiting for my spine to straighten out and to the point of where they could put this bone strut in. So when they got to the point, every so often they would take me out of the traction, put me in a wheelchair that had the same sort of setup in it that pulled up on my head, because my spine wasn't stable anymore because of the muscles being loosened off of it, my neck and that sort of thing. So they would wheel me down, and I would get x-rays taken every so often, and they would measure the progress of how they would straighten it. So I think it was maybe 8 months or so before it got to the point of where they felt they were confident that they wanted to operate on it. So the next surgery I had, I went in and they cut my fibia out of my leg, and they split the lining down the bone, peeled the bone out, sewed it back up, and the bone regrew back down inside my leg. And they took that piece of bone out, and they took, I can't remember if it was 3 or 4 of my discs out of my thoracic vertebrae. They removed the discs, and they fused my spine, and then they fused the fibia to that area that they were stabilizing. They removed one of my ribs and took chips off of my hip for that as well. So I had an incision on my hip. I had, the incision down my spine from when they removed the muscles, and then they cut me open from, under my arm all the way to my spine on one side, deflated one of my lungs, and I think it was a 9 or 10 hour surgery they did. And I came out of that feeling like I've been shot out of a shit cannon. It was pretty bad. They had me on like a full-time morphine drip, and they had me put me in a body cast, and I was in traction for months again in the bed until the bone solidified. And when they got to the point where they were confident that the bone had all fused, then I think that was a little over a year that I was in the hospital. Then they put me in a body cast, with a thing that held my chin up, and turned me loose and sent me back home.
How old were you when this happened, Shane? Like, how long ago was that?
I was 16 when that happened. So I missed a year of high school for that.
Wow.
So I went back onto the farm and with a body cast on, and was going out trapping and doing all the shit they told me I wasn't supposed to be doing. And I can still remember breaking sticks over my knee in that that jerking motion, just moving my head a little bit, and it creating this incredible pain, little things like that. Sneezing was like, to sneeze was like the worst pain in the world, in the hospital after surgery. It was like death, But I was out trapping and hunting and, trying to get my life back in order, riding horses with this cast on. And I'd come back and my doctor would be like, he told me I could never do any kind of physical sports. I could never do any kind of, couldn't ride horses, none of that kind of stuff. He says, don't do any of that. It's too dangerous, And I showed back up for a checkup and he's like, you're doing what? He just shook his head. He goes, that's phenomenal that you can do all that stuff, And, it was just, I know it just got to be a mindset for me. It was a survival thing, and I was hospitalized with a lot of children that had a lot of really serious illnesses in that ward of the children's hospital. There was kids with cystic fibrosis and all kinds of things, and a lot of them were really succumbing to their diseases. And, I just would look around and think to myself, I'm not like that. I would never lay there and give up, So while they were, struggling to stay alive, just out of pure mindset, I was at night, I'd be sitting there with a sandbag doing arm curls, and like doing anything I could, trying to get myself back. They told me I couldn't get out of bed for 4 weeks. In the middle of the night, I would get out of bed and walk around my room, even 2 or 3 steps, just because to prove that I could do it, And then when recovery time came around, they're like, wow, you're really coming along great. And I want to tell them, like, it's been 3 weeks. I've been walking for 3 weeks already. So, there was a lot of probably personal development with that, like things that I didn't count on happening to me. There was, when you're in a place where people have to take care of you, when you're having to crap in a bedpan because you can't get to a toilet, or, a nurse walks in and goes, hey, you're going to get an enema now before you go in for surgery, and you don't have any choice. It really makes you go, wow. You really appreciate when days are good, and it really creates a sense of gratitude for what you have, and really makes you focus on keeping what you have and not losing it, So I think that's kind of where there was kind of the groundwork laid for that sense of gratitude that I'm very, very focused on now, and I'm, practice daily, and that kind of moved into my adolescent life. I really had probably young, I had probably a pretty heavy chip on my shoulder. I was really competitive. I was probably fairly arrogant because, I'd fought for my life already. I knew what it was like to lay there and face dying, and nobody was going to tell me what to do or how to do it or what I could and couldn't do. I was going to be the master of that, and that took a while for me to kind of grow into, so to speak, to kind of find a way to channel that into a positive, productive part of my life, and in the later years, Facebook came along, and there was this, all of a sudden, this pipeline to everybody. And I kind of got into it a little bit, and it was kind of that thing where you could just sound off and say your thing or talk to this guy or do that or whatever. And it was really pointless. And then I got into the hunting side of things, and I'm thinking to myself, what happens if I set up a profile where you find like-minded people and start networking, and and it benefits you hunting, but also you start connecting with people that inspire you, and and start building something different than what's going on. So that's kind of how the Ram Hunter thing came along. It was just kind of like a branding kind of a thing. It was a way of stepping away from what everybody else was doing and being something a little bit different. And about that same time, it was not long after being in Mexico that I started doing that. And about that same time, I got involved with the Wounded Warriors, and that was a pivotal point in my life. That was a point where my life diverged from what was normal for me and to a completely different perspective on humanity, on being of service to people, you know, and sometimes being a lifeline, quite frankly, to people. So by chance, I just happened to get involved in it. You know, I was very enthusiastic about being involved in it, and made friends with some of the people that had founded it, and Ron Robood, who's, you know, a prince of a man, and started, you know, devoting whatever time I could to them, you know, whatever they asked of me. You know, I've to this day, if they asked anything of me, I'd give them whatever they asked, time, money, whatever they needed, you know. So so getting involved in Wounded Warriors was really kind of an extension of who I was as a person, because growing up, I went through a lot of trouble coming to terms with my injury and my condition, and the fact that I looked a little bit different than everybody else, that I had these injuries, that I had these scars, that I had, you know, that part of my back looks like I got hit by a rocket launcher, you know. And I started to realize at a certain point, you know, somebody would recognize me out of the blue, and I'd be like, man, I walked by that person 5 years ago. How would they remember who I am? And I started realizing, what if my image was something memorable to somebody? What if that was a way of that reminded them of who I was? What if I capitalized on that? What if I started using who I was to try and inspire other people? What if I stood out instead of standing back? What if I stood forward and said, this is what happened to me. This is what I was told I couldn't do. This is what I thought I was capable of. And this is what I want you to try and do. You know, this is how I want you to try and tackle the problems. So it was this really incredible epiphany. You know, it was just like walking into a glass wall. I stopped and I was like, wait a second. I've been looking at this completely wrong. So it went from being, you know, an integral part of my life to, you know, basically a tool to connect with people that were struggling in various parts of their life, and gave me an opportunity, you know, with the greatest sense of humility, to be able to touch people's lives and sometimes inspire them, or, you know, help them, or be there for them, or whatever it was. And, you know, I'm not saying there's people lined up out the door by thousands, but I've had some very interesting interactions with people where they've come up and commented about things I've said or done and how it's impacted them. And it's been incredibly humbling. You know, it's been amazing to be able to be have that honor of helping somebody in a time when they felt like they didn't have any. You know, one of my best friends in the world right now is a wounded warrior, and he'll tell anybody that listens, he goes, you saved my life, literally. You saved my life, and you're gonna always be my brother no matter what, you know.
That's fantastic, Shane. You know, I've been following you a long time too on social, on Facebook, and yeah, I see it all the time. You know, the inspiration you are for people, and super thankful for that. Now, with the world's messed up, right? It's upside down. COVID's created all this challenge and a lot of anxiety for people. Have you seen people struggling more, and you feel like you're having to do more to support people with this, or it's just you've been there doing that all along anyway? So what's your take on all this?
I think for me, we're kind of rural up here, so we're really somewhat insulated from it. I've traveled a fair bit in the last little while, so I've got to see kind of a cross section of different parts of the country. And it seems like where people sort of gravitate towards an outdoor lifestyle, they seem a little more insulated from it. And I think for me, I'm seeing two really glaring kind of opposing parties. I see the one side that's all for being told what to do, and then I see the other side that's like me, that I question everything. and because of people like me that question everything, things change, things get better, they move around. I'm not happy with being told to stand here in the corner and do this. I want to know what the reason is, and I want to know why, and I want to know how long. And I'm always asking questions, right? So I've seen a lot of people that are struggling now. My friend's just closing down his business. It's not directly COVID related, but it's directly related to Canada's stance on how they're handling it economically, and it's created an impact in northern British Columbia in the oil field big time. I lost a couple businesses up here because of the way they're looking at things, and I know he's dropping his business. I have another friend that was just hunting with us that lost hers, and I wonder what the end game of it all is. Are we going to be an economically prosperous country, or are we going to be an eco-green friendly, everybody kind of live off the land kind of thing? I'd be happy with the second one if everybody was that way, but I mean, it would be a huge structure change, right? And I don't see it that being realistic. People will say, I'm against polluting, but they never ever question, where does the rubber that comes off of your tires that wear out go? By the millions of tons a year. The same person that marches down the street with a sign, drives their car all over, where does the rubber off your tires go? It goes right into the environment, microplastics, micro rubber, whatever. So I think there's a big cross section of people, that the realists and the people that are really not looking at things.
Yeah, very good point, very valid point, and all a challenging time and things we need to think about, right? And it's a crazy world right now. So
I just think people have most people have an incredibly small view of humanity. I think you have people that go out and because hunting is such an integral part of our family. We garden, we hunt, we fish, we produce. We don't go out and buy meat in the store. My household doesn't. We don't go and buy chicken. We don't go and buy beef. When we go out to restaurants, we don't even buy it. Very rare. All of our food is stuff that we've hunted, stuff that we've grown, stuff that we've canned, made our homemade wine, all those kind of things. We pride on ourselves on being self-sufficient, and then I see, that person that's a vegan standing in front of me telling me, you shouldn't be hunting, you shouldn't be harming animals. And then I tell them, how is it that you can point your finger at me when all the vegetables that you buy is all the product of agriculture, which is one of the biggest annihilators of life on the planet. Every mouse in the field gets crushed, every bird nest gets run over, baby fawns get run over, there's crows following along eating all the food that's being left behind the machinery, and you're telling me that you don't have any impact on that? It's just an unrealistic view. So for me, getting back to the sheep hunting, getting up on a mountain and looking across the expanse of all that, and knowing that I got there, that I was self-sufficient, that I tested myself, has got to be the most satisfying feeling of all of it. And getting other people involved in it, and then also being involved in the conservation of it, and having friends that are involved in it, and surrounding myself with more of the same people that have the same passion and the same love for what I do. It's created a really, the more I've structured my life around the things that I think are really important, it's really made my life great. It's made it amazing, and the majority has to do with the people that I'm surrounded with. I have more friends than I know what to do with now, and I'm thankful for every one of them. I've been in contact with some of the people that challenge me to be a better person all the time, every walk of life. And it's just kind of perpetuated. The more that you embrace that idea, the quicker and faster it starts to happen, and the more your life starts to change. And then you start realizing that you have such a huge network of really high quality people around you. You know, it really makes life a lot of fun, a lot really interesting. You know.
Yeah,
So that's
absolutely.
kind of where the social media thing has really become really interesting to me, because it's allowed me, you know, not only to do business in Mexico and connect with a lot of people like that sheep, but it's also allowed me to connect with a lot of like-minded people like myself.
Mm. Yeah, that's awesome, Shane. And we're so thankful that you're part of our community. You're one of our leaders as well. And, it's such an inspiration to so many different people. And we're always, I'm always loving to see what you're doing and the legacy you're leaving behind and, the family aspect of it with your girls and everything. It's awesome to watch for sure. So super thankful for that. So what's on the horizon for you? What's coming up? What does the next 6 months look like? I know you're going to Mexico. Talk about the next 6 months for Shane Pallister. What does that look like for you?
Definitely Mexico. I'm going to be going to Mexico for a long time. I love the people, love the culture. The hunting's great. That's definitely a bonus. I mean, I've met some incredible friends down there. But I think right now the girls and I are really, talking about the idea of a podcast, the idea of, doing some different documentation of, maybe some kind of off the cuff, different kind of stuff than what's normally going on. So I think we're going to delve into that a little bit. My girls are both, super outdoor oriented and really incredibly gifted as far as, their mental capacity goes. They're brilliant little girls, so they want to go out and they want to know how to make bows. They want to learn how to, show them how to make arrowheads. They want to learn how to make their own arrows. They want to tan their own hides. Like, it just goes on and on. So I definitely want to get them, moving in that kind of a direction where that's going to be kind of an integral part of their life. And, they're both really excited with the idea of connecting with people, and they both are really interested in the volunteer aspect of things too.
So do they have any on the horizon? Do they have anything that they see themselves obviously connected to the earth, maybe following in dad's footsteps, maybe looking at a guiding career or an outdoor career? Do they have any, I know they're still young, but do they have any sort of interest?
They both have decided they want to be veterinarians. So Maya has been saving 50% of everything she's earned since she's been 10. So it's just ingrained in her now that every dollar she makes, 50 cents goes into her savings, and she doesn't, and sometimes more. So they're both adamant that they want to be veterinarians. And they were just having a discussion with my dad the other day. She's like, you know what? In another, when I get out of school in 7 years, you're going to be calling me Dr. Pallister. My dad's like, oh, is that right? So they're very adamant. Like a lot of kids, when they get into teenager, they're like on the fence about hunting sometimes. And these two girls are like, they're killers. They're like little predators. They're definitely amazing, and they're inquisitive. They want to know how everything works. They want to know how, they've learned at a very young age about the sanctity of life, and they understand what death is, and they understand what the enormous responsibility of taking a life, and they know how to care for what they kill. And I think the pair of them could probably go out and shoot a deer in our field and gut it, skin it, and butcher it all by themselves. They might need a little practice, kind of get fine tuning it, but I'm 100% confident they'd be able to do it themselves.
That's
so
fantastic, Shane.
Yeah, proud dad stuff. I'm a incredibly proud father.
That's cool. I look forward to hearing more and seeing more of what they're doing. Didn't you guys just build a log house? Like, what's the story with that?
Yeah, well, yeah, we a friend and I last winter had a few whiskeys and we're sitting there chit chatting. Some of the best ideas come out of a bottle of Wiser's. So we're sitting there, and he's always wanted a log cabin his whole life, you know, like just it's been one of those dreams, you know, like I think almost every man wants a log cabin, right? So we're sitting there having this chit chat, and you know, he's like, I'm gonna buy this cabin. There's this cabin. I'm gonna try and move it, and I'm gonna talk to your dad about putting it on his place. And I'm like, man, that seems like a really big deal trying to move something like that. You know, is that even gonna be financially feasible? And he's like, oh yeah, they're gonna sell it to me for like $40,000, and then I'm gonna spend another $18,000 to move it. And I'm like, there's a lot more to moving a house than that. Like I've moved a few of them, and I said, so we're sitting there mulling this over, and I go, why don't we buy a sawmill and cut all the wood and build a cabin? I go, because I'd been looking at sawmills. I go, I know this sawmill at DNL is amazing. For the whole mill, we can get it for like $38,000. I'll build the cabin for you for half the equity in the saw if you buy the saw. So he's like, okay, it's a deal. So we started doing some drawings on a napkin and thought, oh, you know, we'll go get a permit to cut down some wood, and saw this wood up and build a cabin. Well, that's a big job. Like building a cabin's a big job, but cutting down the wood, logging it, milling it all, and cutting it is a monumental job. So I think in hindsight, I would probably sit down and spend a little more time calculating the man hours and time it took for my side of the deal. But I mean, he's like a brother. He's like my brother. So for him, it was a lifelong dream realized, you know, and for me, it was an incredible learning experience, to put it lightly. And, you know, we got this cabin built now and got the sawmill. Sawmill's obviously paid for, but so we have a sawmill sitting here, and I think we're gonna build some more cabins and build some small, like hunting cabins, portable ones, you know, and sell them, that kind of thing. So it's something where I can work in the yard with, you know, having the kids at home, and can kind of build cabins when we're not hunting, fit it in between, you know.
Oh, very cool. But yeah, it was beautiful. I seen some pictures of it and it looked fantastic. It looks, yeah. And you've never done this thing before? You've never built a...
Well, I've built houses all my life and done construction, but never anything like that, you know. So that was definitely a learning experience.
Yeah.
I built antler chandeliers, all kinds of stuff like that. So
right.
we doing a little bit more of that this winter, you know. I think we'll put some antler lights in the cabins, those kind of things. But
yeah.
Just spend more time at home with the kids, you know, kind of doing, you know, building. We're gonna build some bows this winter. We're gonna build some arrows and
nice.
make some arrowheads, do some things like that. Brew some more wine.
Nice.
Make a bunch of sausage, all that kind of stuff. You know, just kind of get back to the basics. You know, teach them the fundamental, kind of simple parts of life. You know.
Mm-hmm. The important stuff, right?
What's that?
The important stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, we've had a lot of fun with me and my buddy. You know, like he chopped his wrist with a chainsaw when we were out there. So he's like, I got to go to the hospital. I got to get this sewn up. I'm like, I'll just sew it up at home on the kitchen table, you know. And he's like, yeah, okay, I guess because I have sutures and stuff. He goes, okay, you can do that. And I'm like, it's no big deal. I've done tons of it, you know. And he's like, and his girlfriend's a veterinary assistant, and she finds out. She goes, "You're not sewing him up. I am." So you know, during the course of this cabin, we're sewing my buddy up on my kitchen table. We had a lot of fun with that kind of stuff. You know, it's been definitely a blast.
That Wisers comes in handy for that sort of stuff too.
Oh
right?
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, yeah, it was hilarious. In hindsight, he's like, I feel kind of bad that you know, that's. The deal kind of went way more my way than yours. I go, yeah, it did. We'll figure it out. It all comes around, right?
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, Shane. I really appreciate you taking the time. I've already taken, Steve and I have already taken an hour and a half of your day, or almost 2 hours here. So really appreciate it. You're always an inspiration, and just love what you're doing in the wild sheep world, and the support you give the conservation community and everything you do there. So just really appreciate everything you're doing out there, and just keep it up. Look forward to more from you guys, and especially from your daughters, see what they they come up with over the next couple of years. Some pretty cool stuff, I'm sure. So.
No, well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I definitely look forward to being a lot more active in wild sheep and conservation in the future. So
Awesome.
I'm always here, ready
Yeah.
to go.
So, well, it looks like January we're getting a bit of a different experience with Sheep Show going to the experience now, and so that's going to be. I was hoping to see you down in Reno. That's not going to happen. So we'll have to see what it looks like. And for the Wild Sheep Society BC, we're not exactly sure what March looks like in our February show in Dawson. So we're just figuring that out. We're going to have a meeting in the coming week and make some decisions on that and what that looks like. But hopefully we get post-COVID and we get back together and get together in these locations.
Yeah, no kidding. I'd actually spoken with Wild Sheep with Gray Thornton here about a week and a half ago or something like that. He was looking for people to be on their promo team, so I'm gonna do what I can to help them out. And
awesome.
I'll do what I can to help you guys out as well. Be happy to help.
I really appreciate that, Shane. And yeah, like you know, I was really disappointed last year we were having you there for the Friday night for you know, to speak and stuff. So you know, obviously we're going to have you back. Provided you're able to attend, but I'm not sure when or how that looks. But just really happy to have you on the Zoomcast today with us. So
yeah, I'd be honored to do whatever you need.
Awesome, man. So anyway, it's enough for your day. Appreciate it. Wishing you all the best. For any viewers, love to hear feedback from you. You guys have been letting us know a little bit how we can improve things, what we can do a little bit better. You know, we're getting great guests on, a guy like Shane. If you got somebody you want to see, let us know. We'll see what we can do to get them on the Zoomcast. So have a great day, everyone. Shane, thanks again. Steve, thanks for all you do. And we'll hopefully get together soon, guys.
All right. Thanks, boys.
Awesome, guys. Cheers.